Ethan wiped sweat from his brow as he navigated the dense underbrush of Daintree Rainforest Forest. The mid-afternoon sun cast long shadows through the towering trees, creating an eerie interplay of light and darkness. He and his friends, Lucas, Maya, and Sophie, had set out on this hiking trip to celebrate the beginning of summer. The promise of adventure had lured them into the depths of the forest, far from the beaten path. "Are we sure we're going the right way?" Sophie asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. She glanced nervously at the map in her hands. "Of course," Lucas replied confidently, though he too looked uncertain. "The old cabin should be just a few more miles ahead. Trust me, it'll be worth it." They pressed on, the forest growing denser and more foreboding with each step. Birds stopped chirping, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His eyes scanned the trees, but he saw nothing. As the afternoon wore on, they finally reached a clearing. In the center stood an old, decrepit cabin, its wooden structure weathered and decaying. The windows were dark and empty, like soulless eyes staring back at them. "This must be it," Lucas said, though his voice lacked the earlier enthusiasm. Maya shivered. "I don't like this place. It feels wrong." "Come on, Mia," Ethan said, trying to lighten the mood. "It's just an old cabin. What's the worst that could happen?" They approached the cabin cautiously, the wooden porch creaking under their weight. Lucas pushed the door open with a loud groan. The interior was dim, the only light coming from the gaps in the boarded-up windows. Dust motes danced in the air, disturbed by their entrance. "Let's set up camp inside," Lucas suggested. "It's getting late, and we need shelter." Reluctantly, the group agreed. They laid out their sleeping bags and lit a small lantern. The flickering light cast long, unsettling shadows on the walls. As night fell, the forest outside seemed to come alive with strange noises, rustling leaves, distant howls, and the occasional snap of a twig. Ethan lay in his sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed through the cabin. He bolted upright, his heart racing. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. The others sat up, their eyes wide with fear. "Maybe it's just an animal," Lucas said, though he didn't sound convinced. Another thump, this time closer. Then a scratching sound, like nails on wood. "We need to leave," Sophie said, her voice trembling. But before they could gather their things, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The lantern flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Ethan fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the pitch-black room. The scratching grew louder, now coming from inside the cabin. His flashlight beam caught something moving in the corner, a figure, hunched and grotesque. "Run," Ethan yelled, grabbing Maya's hand and pulling her toward the door. Lucas and Sophie followed, their breaths ragged with fear. They burst out of the cabin and into the night, the forest around them a maze of shadows. Ethan's mind raced as they stumbled through the underbrush, desperate to put distance between them and whatever was inside the cabin. Behind them, the cabin door crashed open, and they heard a guttural growl. Ethan glanced back and saw a shape moving in the darkness, faster than any human should be able to move. "Keep running," he shouted, his legs burning with effort. They ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping at their faces. The growls grew louder, closer. Maya tripped and fell, pulling Ethan down with her. Lucas and Sophie stopped to help, but the creature was upon them. Ethan caught a glimpse of it, a twisted, monstrous figure with pale, mottled skin and eyes that glowed with a malevolent light. "Get up!" Lucas screamed, yanking Ethan and Maya to their feet. They sprinted through the trees, the creature's snarls echoing in their ears. Ahead, they saw the faint outline of a cave entrance, a dark maw in the side of a rocky hill. "In there," Sophie shouted, pointing. They dove into the cave, the darkness swallowing them. Ethan turned and shone his flashlight at the entrance, just in time to see the creature stop at the threshold, hissing in frustration. It seemed unable to enter the cave, as if some invisible barrier held it back. "Is everyone okay?" Ethan panted, his chest heaving. Maya sobbed quietly, clutching her scraped knees. Lucas and Sophie were pale, their eyes wide with fear. "What the hell was that thing?" Lucas asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Ethan replied, "but it can't come in here. We need to rest and figure out what to do next." They huddled together, the flashlight their only source of comfort in the oppressive darkness. Outside, the creature prowled, its growls a constant reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the cave entrance. Hours passed, and the group's fear gradually gave way to exhaustion. They took turns keeping watch, though sleep was fitful and plagued by nightmares. As dawn approached, the creature's growls faded, and the forest grew silent once more. Ethan ventured to the cave entrance, peering out cautiously. The creature was gone, but the sense of foreboding remained. "We need to get out of this forest," he said, "but we have to be careful. That thing could still be out there." They emerged from the cave, the early morning light filtering through the trees. The forest seemed less menacing in the daylight, but the memory of the night's terror lingered. As they made their way back toward the trail, Ethan kept a vigilant watch, his nerves on edge. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made his heart race. They moved quickly and quietly, the weight of their ordeal hanging heavily over them. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the edge of the forest. The sight of their car, parked where they had left it, was a welcome relief. They piled in, and Ethan started the engine, not daring to look back as they sped away from Daintree Rainforest forest. In the rearview mirror, the dark silhouette of the forest receded into the distance. Ethan knew they had escaped, but the memory of the creature and the terror it had brought would haunt them forever. I never expected my life to turn into a nightmare. My name is Daniel. Growing up in a small town nestled within the dense woods of the Pacific Northwest, I always felt safe and secure. The thick canopy of evergreens provided a comforting shelter, and the town's residents were like family. But that sense of security was shattered one fateful night, transforming my life into a horror story of survival. It began on a cold October evening. The air was crisp, and the moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape. I was alone in my cabin, nestled deep within the woods, relishing the solitude. The fire crackled in the hearth, and the wind howled outside. I was sipping on a cup of hot cocoa, wrapped in a blanket, when I heard a faint scratching at the door. At first, I dismissed it as a branch brushing against the wood, but the scratching persisted, growing louder and more insistent. My heart began to race, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I got up, my feet moving as if on their own accord, and approached the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. The scratching had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I hesitated for a moment before opening the door a crack. The cold wind rushed in, extinguishing the warmth of the cabin. My breath fogged in the chilly air as I stepped outside, scanning the shadows. Nothing seemed amiss, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at my gut. Quickly shut the door and locked it, trying to shake off the unease. Hours passed, and the fire began to die down. I decided to turn in for the night, hoping that a good night's sleep would dispel my fears. But as I climbed into bed, the scratching started again. This time louder and more frantic. My pulse quickened, and I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Grabbing a flashlight and my grandfather's old hunting knife, I ventured outside once more. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the tall, looming trees and the shadows that danced between them. The scratching sound led me to the edge of the forest, where I found deep gouges in the bark of a tree marks that no animal, I knew of could make. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the air, and my flashlight flickered. Swung the beam around, trying to pinpoint the source. There, in the shadows, I saw glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. They were large, too large to belong to any known creature. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was not alone. The creature emerged from the shadows, revealing a monstrous form. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its body covered in matted fur, and its claws glistened with a sickening sheen. Its face was a grotesque amalgamation of human and beast, with eyes that glowed like embers. A primal fear took hold of me, and I knew I had to fight for my survival. Raised the hunting knife, my hands trembling. The creature lunged at me with a speed that belied its size. I barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as its claws swiped past my face. I slashed at it with the knife, but the blade barely made a dent in its thick hide. It roared in anger, a sound that echoed through the woods and shook me to my core. Desperation fueled my actions as I tried to fend off the monster. Each movement was a blur of instinct and terror. I managed to land a few more blows, but they did little to slow it down. The creature's strength was overwhelming, and I knew I couldn't keep this up for long. In a moment of clarity, I remembered the old tales my grandfather used to tell me, stories of ancient spirits and protective charms. I frantically searched my memory for anything that could help. Then it hit me, the silver locket my grandmother had given me. It was said to ward off evil spirits. I didn't know if it would work, but I had no other choice. I fumbled for the locket, pulling it from my pocket. Holding it out in front of me, I prayed for some kind of protection. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing as it focused on the locket. For a moment, it seemed to waver, its monstrous form flickering as if caught between two worlds. Taking advantage of its hesitation, I thrust the locket towards the creature, chanting the old incantation my grandmother had taught me. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but I poured all my hope and fear into them. The locket began to glow with a blinding light, and the creature let out an ear-piercing screech. The light enveloped the monster, and it writhed in agony, its form dissolving into shadow. With one final, deafening roar, it vanished into the night, leaving only the faint smell of sulfur in its wake. Collapsed to the ground, the adrenaline leaving my body in a rush. The forest was silent once more, the oppressive darkness lifting. I stumbled back to my cabin, locking the door behind me. The fire had gone out, leaving the room cold and dark. I relit it, the flames casting a warm glow that chased away the remaining shadows. Exhausted and shaken, I curled up on the couch, clutching the locket to my chest. Sleep did not come easily that night. My dreams were haunted by visions of glowing eyes and monstrous forms. When I finally awoke, the morning sun was filtering through the windows, casting long shadows on the floor. The events of the night before felt like a distant nightmare, but the deep gouges in the tree and the faint smell of sulfur in the air were undeniable proof.